It's time to switch on.
Today's News Talk Radio. Very entertaining. Yeah! TNT.
Okay, let the post-mortem continue here this morning. I'm super happy. I'm completely stoked to have my colleague and old sparring partner from days of yore in the TNT house this morning, in the Locked and Loaded house this morning, the one and only Patrick Henningsen, international man of mystery, broadcaster, investigative journalist, geopolitical analyst, and all that and more here this morning. Patrick, how are you doing?
I'm good, Rick. It's great to be with you.
Hell's bells, man. We were talking about it's been a while, and I have a good memory. The last time you were on this show was February 2022, just after the launch of TNT. I was scrambling around for a guest one day, and you very kindly hopped on. This was pre-Ukraine-Russia special military operation, pre-Middle East, pre-Hezbollah, pre-all the Joe Biden shenanigans, and of course, general elections. A lot of water has passed under the bridge. So much has happening in such a short space of time.
Sure, it has indeed. It has indeed, Rick. So, fire away. I'm the oracle, ready to shake the eight ball, see what happens.
Well, with you, it's very difficult to know where to go because obviously you're very on the ball with what's happening in the Middle East, with what's happening in America, with what's happening in the UK. I'm literally going to lob this at you. What's the first thing that comes to mind? So if I say to you, what's really rolling around in that head of yours this morning, predominantly, what would the answer be, news-wise?
Well, give me a topic. I've got my sort of eyes on quite a few things in, various elections, UK election. You could start there if you want to go to Biden and Trump, senility, but take your pick.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm just saying, right, okay, what's the first thing that comes to mind? So you mentioned the UK election, then you mentioned obviously what's going on in the US. So let's do that. Let's take it in that order. So obviously no surprises in the UK. Starmer is in so-called landslide majority. Sunak is packing his bags, soon to be departed. We've seen the surge of reform. Farage has got in at the 8th attempt in Clacton-upon-Sea, not a very exotic place, but he's in there anyway. Northern Ireland politics, we're seeing DUP unseated in North Antrim after 50-odd years of dominance. Lagan Valley constituency, Jeffrey Donaldson's hotbed of unionism, he's up for alleged sex abuse charges. That's now been taken over by the so-called middle ground as well. Massive political upheavals going on. Patrick, I've read it that the world seems to be heading towards the right, but the UK and Ireland seems to be veering off towards the left. Why do you think that is?
I think the public is veering away from, a lot of people are veering away from what they view anyway as the establishment. Of course, that's easier said than done. As we know, the establishment tentacles have made their way into so many different, alternative parties, movements. The establishment's old trick is to absorb the alternative movements and then create controlled opposition out of them. But in the UK, the thing that really stuck out at me, Rick, was the voter turnout. Extremely low voter turnout and a high margin of victory for Keir Starmer, for Labour. That's really worrying because that's not really a majority landslide. It is based on who came out to actually vote, but it's bad news for democracy because it shows a high level of despondency and disinterest in the electorate. And then when you put somebody forward that seems to have been a fait accompli, I mean, if you're just going straight by the polls, it seemed like the Tories didn't even put up a fight. It's almost as if calling this snap general election, it couldn't have benefited Rishi Sunak or the Tories. It's almost like this was a sort of controlled changing of the guard. In other words, the Tories aren't too bent out of shape. They've got a neoliberal Tory in there as head of the Labour Party. That's what Keir Starmer basically is. An establishment gatekeeper, somebody who is not going to do any significant changes. He's all in for all the theaters of war. He's all in for arming Ukraine. He's all in for arming Israel to the hilt. He's all in for the WEF. He's all in for vaccination campaigns, etc. He's probably future lockdowns, all those sort of things. So these are all things that he's on board with. So the establishment couldn't be happier. They've got somebody in who doesn't even have a mandate. It reminds me of Macron in France, who also had record low voter turnout, which swept him into power effectively. So there's no real mandate there. That's the problem.
This whole business as well, listening to you talk, I've been saying pretty much the same thing in terms of it's a changing of the guard, a passing of the baton, if you will. But if you say that to the general population who have been fed on the mainstream media to suggest that there could be some sort of controlled demolition of the Tory party from within to hand over power to Labour, or indeed in America with the Democrats, obviously it's likely that Trump will be re-elected there. When you look at who they're fielding in the shape and form of Joe Biden, when this whole debate thing was first mooted, where he actually came out and challenged Trump to debate, I want to take him on, I'm going to beat him. I thought, no, they're not going to let that happen. They can't let that happen. And then they did let it happen. And it was in a closed studio and there was no audience there. And, it was a fiasco, almost like the light bulb went off supernaturally in America, where they realized he was this decrepit, doddering old fool, which we have seen. And it's been evident for a very, very long time. So why would you field a candidate like Joe Biden and then continue to support him, like Obama coming out this week and saying, oh, he had a bad night. I know what it's like to have a bad night. He had jet lag. He had a dose of the cold. Why would you endorse quite possibly the most car wreck candidate in history unless you were planning to lose the election? It sounds nuts. It sounds insane, but that's effectively what's happening.
Well, there's an alternative explanation to that, Rick, and one which my guest so astutely brought up yesterday on our program here on TNT, and that's in terms of establishment Democrat candidates, Biden was the last candidate that they could put as a sort of wall to shield against the exposure of just widespread corruption in the Democratic Party, specifically what happened under the Obama administration. Of course, while Joe Biden was vice president, basically using Ukraine as an ATM machine, complete sort of black hole of corruption there during the 8 years of Obama. And then when Trump came in, he wanted to sort of revise the policy slightly. Deep state wasn't having it. They went all in to impeach him, not once but twice. And then basically anybody that dared to look into, corruption in Ukraine as it relates to U.S. officials during that time, that was totally off limits. Why? Because they were basically setting up what we eventually saw happen in 2022, the war that was inevitable, the war that NATO wanted. The situation which they wanted to happen, they engineered it. It happened. So Biden was it's the last sort of facade, decrepit, decaying. Like Basil Valentine calls him a sandcastle, decaying before our eyes. He's the last thing they had. You've got Hillary, you've got all these other establishment hacks. Nobody's left. Anybody that's potentially marketable as a presidential campaign either can't somehow carry the rank and file Democratic vote because they just don't have the widespread appeal across all the younger demographics. Biden was in on a whip line in 2020, the primaries. He wasn't even a front runner up until after Super Tuesday. The whole thing was set up. They needed to protect the legacy of the party, of Barack Obama, of Joe Biden himself, and who better to put in there but like one of the sort of key corrupt individuals. Is in his self-interest and his family's self-interest to basically keep a lid on all of these scandals, all of this graft, this grift, this corruption. And now it's all basically collapsed on its face now. There's nothing they can do to further prop up this bad idea that was Joe Biden. By the way, I have questions whether he was legitimately elected in 2020. And that's me, having a really good close view in swing states, especially Arizona and Maricopa County, where I saw the fraud pretty much firsthand in 2022 midterms, with all the voting machines suddenly malfunctioning in the Republican districts. So, we know that this stuff goes on, and this is what you get. This is what you get when you have a fraud, election rigging, and you get a poor candidate like this, a corrupt individual, career politician who's up to his neck in all sorts of scandals. This is what you get, a dysfunctional democracy. This is the problem that the U.S. faces now, and the Democrats specifically.
Hells bells, what a summary and what an accurate one. You know, it's grim. You've just given us a very grim summary of what lies ahead or what the current situation is in America. And of course, with 5 years potentially of Labour in the UK, it's looking equally grim for us over here too. We've got to take a quick headline break, Patrick. When we come back at the other side, let's look at alternatives. We'll keep it on America at the minute, because literally whether Biden wants to stay on to run the race or not, can he? Physically, I think I'm noticing his deterioration has seemed to have accelerated over the last 12 months. Can he literally stay in the race physically, mentally or bodily, until November/December time? Let's look at that. And if he can't, what are the other options? Because that seems to be a very big talking point. Like, well, if he's not running, well, then who will? Will it be Harris? Will they get Newsom in there? Will it be Mike Obama or Barack Obama for that matter? Who knows? Who knows who it'll be? So let's look at options and choices possibly for the Democrats after the break here on TNT, today's News Talk.
This July, we're taking life seriously. Cardiac arrest is scary and more common than you might think. Did you know that every year nearly 9 million people will experience a cardiac event outside of hospital? Would you know what to do? I'm Australian actor Steve Bastoni, and I'm urging everyone to learn CPR as part of our Don't Die July campaign. Visit don'tdiejuly.com and sign up today, because you can't put a price on life.
This is TNT Radio.
Yes, indeed. Talking with Patrick Henningsen here this morning live. Just found out that he's in France at the minute. He moves around a lot, does our Patrick, but he's always faithful to TNT, and he's always ready to broadcast or to hop on at the drop of a hat. And for that, I am very grateful this morning, Mr. Henningsen. He's got his own show, of course, the Patrick Henningsen Show on TNT, and of course the Sunday Wire show that's been running for quite some time now. You can check it out on a Sunday. Fantastic show. Also, Patrick, alternatives. Let's look at alternatives here. There's no point looking at alternatives in the UK because Starmer is now in. Alternatives in America, it's going to be Trump versus whoever. Jill Biden has came out this week, talking to her husband condescendingly, telling him he's answered all the questions. You did great, Joe. He's looking at her with a blank expression. He's adamant that they're not going to step back. The donors for the Democrats might have something to say about that. And of course, if he does step back, who steps in? Kamala Harris. Her name's not even really being mentioned. It's almost like, no, it can't be her. Trump was caught, was it yesterday or the day before, in his golfing cart, calling her an effing disaster of a woman. And someone said, well, should the next president be talking like that about someone? And the response was, well, it's the truth. She's a disaster. So who does step in if Sleepy Joe nods off?
Well, actually, the bookies are now favoring Kamala Harris as of yesterday. So she's in the pole position. And I think this is the problem that the Democrats have. It's not easy to replace a presidential candidate midstream in an election cycle, like right before the convention. It shows real desperation. It means that they have no confidence whatsoever that they can win. But just because your candidate sucks and they're weak, and even if they're senile, you can't just swap and change them because you're afraid you're going to lose. And they did this in the primaries. They suspended the primaries to keep any challengers away from Biden, changing, 250 years of tradition there. They're running debates before the national conventions. This has never happened before. So these are all sort of breaks with Democratic tradition in the U.S. because the Democrats are panicking. They loft all these cases and indictments at Trump during the election year to try to prevent him from getting on the ballot. So they don't want to have a normal election, and not unless they're sure that their candidate's going to win. Now they've got their last card here, and the problem is it's going to be hard because the Democrats are so married to identity politics that they thought of denying the first black female a chance at the White House, at the presidency. This would just be complete meltdown for a sizable wing of the Democratic Party. But she's so unpopular, Kamala Harris, within her own party. She hasn't really done anything in her career. She has no real achievements to speak of other than being elected to the U.S. Senate in California. She didn't even serve a full term. She left halfway to join Joe Biden's ticket, and he telegraphed in advance, I'm going to select a black female to be vice president. So that was a diversity hire, a quota hire in order to sort of placate the progressive base of the party. And now you're stuck. Now the Joe Biden, Mr. Magoo, is literally ready to check out. And you've got this crazy cackling, political performative sideshow, Kamala Harris, who doesn't really have anything to offer intellectually, ideas-wise. She's not a good orator. She's really a soundbite machine, and she's annoying to Democrats. But they have to go with her. They really do, because otherwise it'll be like a total meltdown for the hardcore progressives. They painted themselves into the most awful corner here. Michelle Obama, Barack Obama's wife, she could probably have a good run, maybe even beat Trump, because it'll be a 2-for-1. You vote for me, you get Barack back in the White House. That's probably even a better deal than what the Kamala Harris ticket is offering. And who's going to be her vice president? I mean, that would just be insane. So, I mean, I don't see any good outcomes. Actually, the one that makes the most sense is Gavin Newsom from California, because he's got political dynasty. California governors tend to move into the White House or show well in national elections because it's the biggest state, the biggest economy. So they have the bona fides there. So that to me would make sense. But then it'll be like, well, we can't have two white men in a row. This is the Democrats. So basically, they've set a trap for themselves, and you're watching the whole thing fall apart.
Do you know what? Just listening to you talk, if I can use this analogy, it's like ordering an Uber driver, and when you're told that it's going to be Ted Bundy, you complain to Uber, and they apologize and send Jeffrey Dahmer out instead.
Yeah, pretty much. So, I mean, here's the problem. And they're even like talking, Bernie Sanders supporters are even sort of making noise. It should be Bernie. Bernie is older than Joe Biden. So it's like, this is where we're at. This is like the Soviet Union. It's like Mikhail Gorbachev and Leonid Brezhnev. There's only one party. Choose between the two old men, and that's what you get. That's the state of politics right now in the West. We've gone with legitimate opposition. It's no longer viable. No more populism. It's literally party functionaries, period, to maintain a continuity of the establishment. That's it. This is where the West is right now.
Do you know what? We're talking about very serious issues this morning, you and I was talking about serious issues with Jem, and I'm going to be talking about serious issues with Basil. But one thing I notice is we're chuckling quite a bit. You're smiling quite a bit. I'm having a laugh. Does this not underscore the importance of, appreciating the gravity of the position in which we find ourselves in, but at the same time, not letting it overwhelm us on a personal level? Because if you lose your sense of humor and you lose a little bit of optimism with regards to the way this could potentially turn out, it mightn't turn out that way, but you got to have some hope, Patrick. If you allowed the gravity of this to consume you, it would tear you right down.
Absolutely. Look, it's already a shit show. Pardon my French. I don't like to swear on air, but it is what it is. We got 2 World War II triggers on the go, one in Gaza, the other in Ukraine. And this is what they're serving up. It can get worse, but if it's World War III, all bets are off anyway. So we might as well just basically kick back and, have a cigar and have a laugh about it. But in the meantime, it is what it is, Rick.
Yeah, all we can do, Patrick, is lend our thoughts and opinions on it, give our, opinions and suggestions, and encourage people, to make sure you keep your own house in order. Be aware of what's going on the world stage, and it is a stage, but don't lose focus on yourself, your own environment, your own family, your own friends, and of course, your own mental health. So listen, we're out of time right now. Thank you so very much for taking the time out of your morning to beam in and join me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you again. That's Patrick Henningsen. Tune in for the Patrick Henningsen Show also on TNT, and on a Sunday, the Sunday Wire Show, 21st Century Wire. So big thanks to you, Patrick. Hopefully it'll not be 2.5 years. Maybe the next time we talk, we'll all be sitting in a little pile of ashes. We'll be using 2 baked beans containers with a big long string in between them, because there'll simply be nothing left in another 2.5 years' time, but I hope not. So big thanks to you, my friend. Have a great day, whatever you're going to do. Got to take a break and welcome Basil Valentine. Also stay tuned for that on Locked and Loaded TNT. We'll be right back.
On air 24/7. This is today's News Talk TNT.